Juju Barnes and you are watching another episode of Creative Writing for Kids. Today I'm going to be talking to you about something called info dumping. So info dumping is when you need your audience, your readers, to understand something about your world in order to understand your story. So if you think about the book The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, or even the films as well, you have to understand a bit of history before you can understand the story. So you have to be told about the magic and the lore, the rings, the history of what happened to the rings, and everything that is in that world in order for the story to make sense. Now, you can do it through info dumping, which sometimes is like a prologue, which is a little bit of book before the book starts. So before chapter 1 of your story, it says prologue, and then you can write all of the history of the world that your readers need to know before you tell them the story. Or the other way of doing it, which is probably the more common way, is to have one of the characters or the narrator explain. So you get to a point in your story and you start paragraph after paragraph listing details about everything they need to know to try and explain what's going to happen in the story in a way that will make sense. Now the problem with info dumping is it's boring. It's so boring. All you're doing is just reading history and info and dates and dates and dates and things that technically you need to know for your story to make sense. But it's so dull. It's like reading a school textbook because all you're doing is being given history or politics or lists of information about why magic is the certain way it is, and that's just boring. You only have to get through it. And you never read an info dump because it's fun. You read it because, you've got to read it or the story won't make sense. And you don't want anybody to only be reading bits of your story because they have to. That's just bad writing. You want them to read your story because they love it and it's exciting and thrilling and they're enjoying it and having a good time. That's the point of writing a story. So, you need to know how to avoid an info dump, because you still need to get that information into your story for your story to make sense, especially if you're writing high fantasy, which is fantasy set in a whole other world. In our world, you can probably get away without doing it anyway, because people know what's going on in our world, they know what a bus is. But if you're writing a story set in a completely fictional world, either an alien planet or a fantasy realm, there's going to be stuff your audience needs to know. So what you use is something called an entry point character. Now it's okay if you can't remember this. I always say this, and it's okay because you can watch these videos again. You can make notes if you need to, or you can just understand what I'm saying and not know the name of what it is. And that's fine too, because I'm not going to be testing you on this stuff. So as long as the information helps, don't worry if you don't remember all the terms. It doesn't matter at all. But your entry point character is a stranger to that world. Now, they could be someone who lives in part of the world, if it's an alien planet or a realm. They could live in part of it, like a hobbit. Now, the hobbits might not know all the history of the rings and all the laws, because they have their own little life in the Shire, and they don't need to know it all. So, when they start on their journey, when Frodo starts going off on his quest, somebody has to tell him what's going on. And when Frodo learns what's going on, so does the audience. So if you think about in Harry Potter, Harry, he doesn't know all the magical lore and the history of Voldemort and everything. Somebody has to tell him. So when Harry finds out, the audience finds out. And this way you don't info dump, because the character who you're travelling with, they have questions and they interact. And they respond, and they learn information at the point in the story they need to. They don't learn it unless it's relevant to the story, so you don't have to do a massive long list of information, because they're interacting, they're explaining it to a character who needs to know. And that way your audience learns when your character learns, and it's just so much more interesting. The other way of doing it is with an outsider to that world. In Narnia, Lucy goes through the wardrobe and meets Mr. Tumnus, and Mr. Tumnus tells the entry point character, Lucy, all about the history of the White Witch and all of that, and Aslan. And then you don't feel like you're being lectured to and having to study and learn loads of boring information, because you're learning at the same point as Lucy is, and you want to know because it affects the character. And that is so much more interesting and fun to read. And so that's what you should do. Don't just list loads of dates and boring information because people just don't want it. I hope this has been helpful for you. Don't forget, on my website, which is www.jjbarnes.co.uk, you can find loads of information over there, writing games, challenges, activities, things that will hopefully get your imagination going. I also have a Facebook page, which is Creative Writing for Kids with JJ Barnes, where you can come and share things you're doing, and I'm posting stuff there too. There's a Pinterest board and obviously all the YouTube videos, and yeah, come find me. And don't forget to subscribe, because it helps my channel grow, which helps me keep bringing you more. Parents, all my social media is down below. I post loads of writing and stuff on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, so come find me there. Thank you very much, and I'll be back again soon. Bye.